Before I start this video, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever picked up a treasure on the road? I'm talking about anything other than money, which may be rare valuable. For those of you who have done so, can type below what treasure you have found and make people jealous. In today's video, based on a true event, two thieves sell a blue glowing treasure to a scrapyard owner who thinks it's worth a fortune. But what they didn't know was that the novelty was a radiation bomb. In fact, when they saw the deadly blue glowed, it was too late. A serious radioactive accident was quickly taking place. So why was this bomb so powerful, and where did it come from? Without further ado, don't forget to double-click before you watch. Now let's take a look at what's happening in Brazil in 1987. The Goiania incident. The Goiania Institute is a private radiotherapy institute located just 1 kilometer from the center of Goiânia. On the 13th of September 1987, two thieves infiltrated the facility. Their names were Roberto and Wagner, and once they saw the equipment, they were sure it was worth a lot of money. They simply dismantled some of the teletherapy equipment and hastily took everything that looked valuable home. They dismantled the equipment that night, unaware that they had already been exposed to radiation. At the same time, they were already experiencing adverse physical reactions such as dizziness and vomiting. They didn't go to the hospital that night, thinking it was just a common illness, and they thought they would be fine after one night. The next day, however, Wagner's left hand became very swollen, and he began to have diarrhea. So the two men became frightened and were rushed to the hospital. However, the doctor looked at his symptoms for a while and could not see anything. He concluded that he had eaten something bad and that he should go home and rest for a few days. Roberto's symptoms were not severe as Wagner, so he continued to dismantle the device on his own. The capsules, called chromogenic elements, were eventually removed from their protective casing. 2 days later, on 16 September, Roberto managed to puncture the capsule with a screwdriver. He was surprised to see a dark blue light coming from the opening. At first, he thought it was some kind of gunpowder and tried to light it, but it did not reach it. At this point, Roberto was overjoyed. He thought he had found a great treasure this time. As he thought about it, some of the glowing material. The rest he sold to a nearby scrapyard. And soon the scrapyard owner, Dwyer, spotted the blue light and was overjoyed. It was definitely a rare item, and he was going to be rich. So Dwyer took the exotic treasure home with him in a blaze of glory, not knowing any of the danger. Not only that, he also called his family and friends to come over and see the mysterious objects. There was a lot of speculation as to what the blue light was. Was it extraterrestrial, paranormal? Whenever it comes from, everyone believed it was a rare treasure. One of Dwyer's friends volunteered to open the capsule with a screwdriver and extracted a lock of powder the size of a grain of rice. Dwyer was generous enough to share this treasure with many family members and friends. However, his wife began to suffer from discomfort and was very sick all day. By this time, the blue powder had already been shared to all the guests. Dwyer sold the remaining metal parts to other scrapyards. At this time, the blue treasure was being distributed more and more widely. On 24 September, Dwyer's brother brought home the blue treasure he had received from his brother. He scattered it on the concrete floor, while his 6-year-old daughter Ryder sat there eating her eggs. How could a child not be attracted by this blue glowing objects? Ryder held the egg in one hand and applied the blue powder to her body with the other, and showing the family that she was glowing. However, the powder drifted onto the egg without her realizing it. Ryder ate it while playing with it, and ended up eating it all. What she doesn't know is that once the substance enters the body, it will kill her even if she receives immediate treatment. As a result, Dwyer's family and friends began to fall ill. His wife began to realize that this was not a coincidence. Until September 28th, she took some suspicious substances from the scrapyard, put them in a container and sent them to the hospital for examination. It turned out that there was a high level of radiation present. The patients were also suffering from acute radiation poisoning. All the people in the chain of transmission from the source were informed that they might have been directly or indirectly exposed to radiation and went to hospital for testing. It is estimated that nearly 130,000 people flocked to the hospital, but only 250 of them were found to have been exposed to nuclear contamination. Some of them even had radioactive residues on their skin. Those who came into contact with the contaminants first were already in jeopardy. For instance, 2 employees from the scrapyard who had been exposed to the radioactive source died of lung failure, internal bleeding, and heart failure. Dwyer's wife's condition worsened. She lost a lot of hair. In particular, she suffered internal bleeding in her eyes and digestive tract at the same time. After a month of exposure to radiation, she also suffered from diarrhea, severe renal disorders, and even cyclisis. Finally, on 23 October 1987, Dwayne's wife died of septicemia. But that's not the only bad news. Remember Ryder, the 6-year-old girl? She died the same day. Perhaps, on the other hand, this was the best relief for Ryder. When the international medical team arrived to help, little Ryder was placed in isolation. All the staff were afraid to go near her. Because she was the only one who had swallowed the radioactive substance, she was already hopeless. In the last few days of her life, her upper body swelled up badly. Her hair was almost falling out. The kidneys and lungs had collapsed severely and was also suffering from massive internal bleeding. She eventually died of septicemia, systemic infection. Sadly, there is no peace after death. Initially, it was planned that Ryder would be buried in the common cemetery in Goiania. The body was placed in a special fiberglass coffin with the lead coating to prevent the spread of nuclear radiation. Despite the preparations made, the neighborhood was not happy. They feared that her remains would poison the land. After all, the effects of nuclear radiation do not last for a day or two. In the worst case scenario, it could affect future generations. On the day of Ryder's burial, a riot broke out in the cemetery and nearly 2,000 people turned out to protest. They paved the way with stones and bricks in an attempt to stop the burial ceremony. But can you really blame them for doing this? Luckily, the riot did not change anything and Ryder was eventually buried. You must be wondering what happened to Goiânia, the owner of the scrapyard. Miraculously, he was among the first to be exposed to the radiation source, yet he survived the high doses of radiation. It is said that this is because the absorption of doses is not continuous, and that over time, the body's repair mechanisms can reverse the cellular damage caused by nuclear radiation. These mechanisms can mitigate the effects of radiation poisoning if the radiation dose is spread over a long period of time. The two thieves who caused the accident both developed several ulcers on their hands as a result of exposure to nuclear radiation and eventually had to have their limbs amputated. After the accident, Dwyer blamed himself for the stupidity of inviting people to watch. He himself was the cause of all the deaths, and as a result, he drank and smoked and struggled with depression for years. In 1994, Dwyer died of cirrhosis. So with all this said, you must be wondering, what was the source of the radiation in the accident? Let's take a brief look at the culprit behind this accident. It was a small capsule containing 93 grams of highly radioactive cesium-137 chloride. The casing was a shielded tube made of lead and steel. It belonged to the Goiânia Radiation Therapy Institute and was used for radiation breeding, sterilization of medical devices and cancer treatment. But in 1985, the facility moved to a new location, and because of the dispute over the ownership of the building, so the cesium-137 telemedicine device was left behind. The owner of the facility, Carlos, told the court in his lawsuit that the building contained abandoned radioactive materials. On May 4, the following year, Carlos tried to retrieve his radiation therapy equipment, but police stopped him. He went to the Brazilian National Nuclear Energy Commission several times to report on the matter. He himself was unable to remove them due to the lawsuit and hoped the authorities could intervene in the matter. However, at the time, these people did not take the matter seriously and the court only sent a security guard to guard the devices. But on 13 September 1987, the same day that the two thieves stole the radiation source, security was called off. The two thieves broke in and caused the worst radioactivity contamination incident in Brazil's history. After the accident, the metal capsule was removed by the Brazilian military. It was later exhibited by the relevant professional school in memory of all the victims. The contamination occurred after the accident. After inspection, in addition to the houses of the deceased and the scrapyard, 42 houses, 14 cars, 3 buses, 5 pigs, and 50,000 rolls of toilet paper were so contaminated that they had to be demolished and destroyed. The items in all these houses, including personal belongings, were also confiscated and examined. The fact is that the fear of radiation has not diminished. Many residents suffer psychologically from fear of contamination, so much so that residents of other cities have shunned the people and products of Goiânia. They are treated like street rats and are not allowed to enter public places in other cities. Since the deaths, 3 doctors from the Goiânia radiotherapy facility have been charged with negligence. After 2000, the Brazilian National Commission for Nuclear Energy was ordered by the courts to pay approximately $750,000 in compensation to the affected population for medical and psychological treatment. In the wake of the disaster, Brazil also overhauled its laws regarding the storage of radiation sources. No walls, no fences, no signs in the no man's land of the city centre. The guards are virtually non-existent. It's unsettling that something so dangerous is left in such a desolate place. It's so obvious to thieves that they can just jump in and out and take whatever they want. To modernize, these people were stupid and ignorant. But in Brazil at that time, the education of the poor was poor. What radiation, what is caesium elements? Without the disaster, they might never have heard of the terms in their lives. All they knew was that it was shiny stuff and looked valuable. Imagine the innocent little girl who painted her body with glitter out of curiosity. Little did they know that the smell of death was already spreading. So ignorance does get people killed. I just hope that such a tragedy won't happen again. So at the end of the video, I would like to ask if you recognize this sign. This is an ionizing radiation warning sign. If you see this sign, just stay away. That's the end of this video. What do you think about this incident? Leave your comments in the comments section below. If you think the video is beneficial to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. You are now watching The WeirdSide, and I'll see you in the next video.